every single day we are bombarded with so many stories, so many people needing help, so many tips. And I'm not saying that one story is more important than another, but if you are telling me that this is what we want to see, this is what we need you to fix, we are going to listen to you. That's just what it is.
Welcome to Reaching Out. I'm your host, Zack Carter. Please join me as I speak with a diverse group of people to find out their thoughts on religion, politics, and culture. All right, thanks everybody for joining us today. I'm excited about our guest today. Her name is Candace Burns. She works for CBS 6 here in Richmond, and she has agreed to come on and talk about news and the media today. So do you want to say hello to everyone, Candace?
Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me, Zack. This is so different to be on the other side of the interview chair.
Yeah.
So bear with me.
Now you're gonna get interviewed. Yeah, I was like, some of these questions are that I've given to people have been kind of tough. I was like, it'll be interesting if I at some point of being interviewed because questions could get tough, but we're gonna have fun.
I can plead the fifth, right?
No, absolutely not. You have to answer every single question. Yes. If there's something you don't want to talk about, we'll just say, hey, I don't know the answer to it. We'll move on. So cool. So first off, tell us a little about yourself. How'd you get into the news business?
I went to a high school that had a news program, and we used to shoot things like after school and like events and programs and basketball games that happened, and then we would actually have a live newscast, and we would put together stories, and we would actually have anchors sit in the desk. We had people run the cameras. We would edit the program together, and then we would broadcast it during homeroom. And as we did it, I did it my sophomore, junior, and senior year in high school, and by the time it was over, my senior year, I was like, I really like this. And so I started, my senior year, junior year, started looking for programs because I kind of knew I wanted to go that way. Yeah. Because before that, I thought I wanted to be a dentist or a lawyer. So programs like that are so necessary in schools. And unfortunately, they're making a lot of cuts these days. And those types of programs are the ones that are going. And I never would have been doing what I'm doing if I didn't have that opportunity to kind of explore it in high school.
Yeah, absolutely. And my producer, me and OJ were talking before we got this started. And we were kind of talking about how, you'll see these people that blow up and get really popular at like 22, 23 in music and stuff. And I was telling him, I was like, but when you look at the background, a lot of them are starting at like 10 or 12 and they're starting touring and stuff at that age. And so it looks like everyone's like, oh, they put out an album at 22. They just blew up out of nowhere. Exactly. But it's like they were putting in work beforehand. So you were putting in work.
In high school.
Sophomore year. Yeah, way
That's
before.
That's so funny that I've seen so many memes and posts about that. What looks like just happened to somebody else is actually you look in their past and it's been decades in the making.
Yeah, exactly. So me starting this had like me doing almost nothing. So
this is gonna blow up.
If I'm gonna blow up, I'm gonna defy those odds. So great. So you work for a local news station. Could you tell the audience the difference between local and national news? Why listen to local news?
Okay, so local news, I've never worked on a national platform, so I can only tell you, I know journalism, and local news is very, we keep our opinions out of it. It's very cut and dry. Like, what did he say? What did she say? We bring it together. We marry the words in the video, and this is what you get. Our opinions out of it. At least that's how it's supposed to be. And most local news stations work that way. National, they're getting more into people who they hire to like be experts or to speak on certain topics, and so they might have a round table with people that they pay to be there or people that they invite to come there, and this seems to be a lot more opinions and people saying how they feel about something or based on just their understanding of it without, sometimes it feels, at least when we're watching, I'm sure we can all agree, totally. Sometimes it doesn't feel like there's facts involved. And it's not actually the correspondent or maybe even the anchor who's saying it, but the people that they have around the table. And sometimes people, I remember I have conversations a lot of times with people where they're like, all news, you guys are just like saying how you feel, and that's not no, you have to be sure that you understand that there is definitely a difference between local and national news. Also, local news focuses more on the community that you live in. So anything that's happening with the mayor, city council, school board meetings, everything that affects you in your local community, you'll find on your local news, national news. A lot of people tell me that they don't watch news in general because it's negative, but I think that if you really pay attention, especially I can speak on for our newscast, we take extra effort to make sure that there are positive stories in there. And it's very important just to watch the news in general because you really should know what's happening in your community. But anyways, it's the key to knowing what's happening around you when you watch local news.
Perfect. Okay, great. So I found a quote that I thought was interesting by Mark Twain, actually, that says, if you don't read the newspaper, you're uninformed. If you read the newspaper, you're misinformed. So I don't know if you've heard that quote before. I feel like a lot of people feel that way. I don't know if I agree with it, but I know that there's a lot of people I've talked to that say, like you were saying a second ago, it seems like it's more opinionated in the media. What do you think has been the cause of the distrust, and do you have a solution?
Read the quote one more time.
Sure, yeah. So the quote was, if you don't read the newspaper, you're uninformed. If you read the newspaper, you're misinformed.
Okay, I don't agree with that entirely, but I can understand how he came to that.
Sure. So defend your position.
So if you watch the news, you're informed. Absolutely. You know what's happening in your community. Now we have a 30-minute newscast. There's a lot happening in the community.
Yeah.
A lot of times we have to break down the story. So we go to a 3-hour meeting and we have to condense that into a minute package. So you're going to get the nuts and the bolts of that, right? And what the reporter feels like is the most important thing for you to know out of that story. So from that story, it's up to you as the viewer to do a little more digging. Maybe if you weren't happy with what you heard, go call your legislator, go call your school board member and find out, like, why is this happening, or go to the meeting yourself. But this is an opportunity for you to know what's happening at that meeting, the important points that the reporter felt like were necessary to say, and then do your own research. I encourage everybody, do your own research before you make an opinion based on the story that you see. But it's up to you to watch the news, do your research, then make your opinion. So I think a lot of people might be, the quote says, if you watch it or if you read it, then you're misinformed, because a lot of people, especially these days, will read a tweet that they see from the newscast. They will read a headline and they won't even go as far as reading the actual article. And so maybe it's not the news organization's fault. Maybe the people need to do a little more research, unfortunately, because a lot of people want it now and they don't want to spend the time doing the extra work to get the meat of what's really happening.
Sure. And so speaking on that, so I've been noticing recently as I've been trying to be more informed, because I didn't used to watch the news at all. And I've tried to make sure that I've been informed about what's going on locally, nationally. And one of the things I've been finding is that statistics can sometimes be deceiving, where, say for instance, I was researching, unarmed men that have been shot by police, for instance. Even diving down into like unarmed can be tough, because if the assailant attacks the police officer and goes for their weapon, technically speaking, they're unarmed, but at the same time they are going for a weapon. So when the viewer is hearing these stats, how should they go about researching, like you're saying, and how did they become more informed? Where do they go?
Okay, so first of all, you make sure you find a news organization that you trust, and you're watching a news organization that you trust. That's the number one thing to make sure that you're doing. Also, in the report, a good reporter will tell you where they got the statistics from. Okay. According to the
CDC
Congress,
or
according to the National Retail Federation. They'll tell you where the numbers came from, because usually those reports are several pages long. Again, they have a 1 minute story that they can tell you on TV. So that's a chance for you to go find that report, or to go read more about it, or to call that organization to find out where they got, and you can go deeper. Also, a lot of times the reports that we do numbers on, statistics on, are available for you to read. So if you really wanted to know and to dive deeper to understand it, it is available in many cases for you to find out.
Interesting. So we just need to make sure, like, as the people, like, you guys can only do so much.
Well, also, you have to make sure you are listening to a reputable source, if you're listening to a reporter you can trust, a news organization that you can trust, and a good reporter, a good journalist will have that information included in the article. If you're reading it in the paper, they'll tell you where they got that information from, because that's just a part of telling a good story. I can't just give out numbers and not have backup to tell you where I got that information from. Then once I give you the little piece of information where I got my information from, you can go to that source and find out more.
Yeah, absolutely. So I understand that's going to be one way to tell if someone is trustworthy or not is if they're presenting like, hey, here's where I'm getting my information. Right. Are there other signs? Because you say you got to find someone you trust, and some people are like, I don't know who to trust. Right. And so that's one way you're saying to find. How else would you say these are good signs that you can trust X, Y, and whoever person it is that
I think that depends on the person. There's so many, the viewer, the consumer, there are so many things that certain people would be attracted to in people. Does that person appear to have character, integrity, ethics? You can find that out just based on how they present the story. When you watched it, did it appear fair? Did they present both sides of the story? How do you feel after you watch their story? Do I like that person? And that's how you kind of decide if it's a good source. From there, then you can dig a little deeper. Was that reporting factual? You can go do the research yourself. And then once you start to weigh those pieces, you're like, oh, that's a really good reporter. If you really are that, if you're really wanting to know that badly if I can trust this source, you do that extra work, and then you know, like, whenever this person comes on TV, I can trust what they're saying because I did a little research to make sure they were telling me the truth the first time, the first few times, and they've always gone through, everything is always stacked up. I like that person. I trust that person. What that person says, I'm going to believe.
Okay. And so who are some of the people that you trust that you enjoy listening to? If you can give some idea of the people you like.
Wow, that's a good question. As far as news sources,
so people you could say, hey, I like Jake Tapper on CNN. Hey, I like Chris Wallace on Fox. Whatever it is.
I don't think that I have a person that I actually am like, they're great. There are tons of great people out there. I just don't have a lot of time to watch TV.
Okay, sure, fair enough. You're like, I'm handling my news, they handle their news. Okay.
But as far as go-to papers that I enjoy reading, I mean, I try to keep it wide. I watch all the networks. I do watch CNN, Fox, and MSNBC just because I like to hear what everybody's saying. Yeah. I read the Washington Post, the New York Times, and USA Today, and the Detroit Free Press because I like to know what's happening in Michigan because that's my home state. Yeah. But I just keep it. Because a lot of times you'll notice that an article is written a little bit differently in this paper compared to that paper, so it's always good to not just stick to one paper but have a different variety so you can formulate your own. That's another way you can do it too, to make sure that you're consuming information the correct way. Read this paper, read that paper, and what do you draw from both of those? And you might find a paper that you love too by doing it that way.
That's great. That's good advice. So you touched on it a little earlier. You had said that it seems like, we're not throwing anybody under the bus, but it seems like in the mainstream media, I was reading an article that was saying that editorializing and inserting opinions as fact in straight news reports has become a problem in our society. So what are your thoughts on this? Are you seeing this as well, and how do you avoid it?
I don't. So we have to be careful because there are different platforms for news. There is talk radio, there are blogs, there are people who just have their opinions and they're just blurting it out. But then there's reputable news organizations. And if you really, really watch CNN, because they catch a lot of flack, the reporters are not the ones, and the anchors are not the ones giving their opinions. It's the guests that they invite on to the show. So a lot of times, and you can see sometimes those conversations get heated. And the anchor will try to say, hey, and they'll throw out, but this is what you said last month in there. But you'll notice that they never give their opinions about the president, about an organization, about a business. They let the talking heads talk. I'm sorry, what was that question?
So we were talking about the editorializing and opinion as fact has been inserted into straight news.
So I haven't seen that where good reputable news organizations are reporting opinions as facts. I do see it a lot with certain news networks. I think we all can kind of figure out where I'm going with that, and then also like talk show, and then like news podcast, and but those people have the freedom to do that because they don't have a boss they have a podcast. They can say whatever they want to say, and sometimes people mix that up.
Sure.
They mix that up with news. If you watch local news, you might see a commentary. That's a difference. Like we have Mark Holmberg who does commentaries for us, and he specifically does RVA. And he does put his opinion in there, but it's very clearly stated that this is a commentary. This is his opinion, and he's worked in this market long enough to be able to tell us his opinion. You can take it for what you want. And at the end of the story, he always says, "That's my point. If you don't agree with it, I'd love to hear what you think about this."
Sure.
And so that's very clear. But in local news, you won't see, I don't like this, so I'm going to do a story on this, and I'm going to tell you why I don't like this. That's not good journalism. That's not what we do.
Sure. Okay.
But do you have examples of that?
Yeah, so I would say, I've heard a couple people would say, so like, I know I've heard people that, because, I know we won't dive into politics too much,
right.
But, conservative people would say, I feel like the media picks on us because they were lenient on Obama during the Obama presidency. Like they'll talk about, Obama went skiing today, but then when like Trump's wife wears high heels to what was it, when she went down to Texas, they were like, I can't believe she wore high heel shoes. But then I've also talked to black people who say, we feel like we are projected in a negative light when it comes to the news because they'll show our picture when some kind of crime happens, but then they might not show a white person's picture and they'll just talk about them. So these are the kind of things where, like, even if it's not blatant, it might be subtle things that it seems like people are saying that the news does to push their own opinions.
Here's the deal. So we are all human. We all live lives. We all know a lot of people. Can you make one person happy 100% of the time?
Never.
We can't either. And just like you said, some people would say we were harder on Obama, and some people say we're harder on Trump. Well, it just depends on what side of the table you sit on. Actually, I can speak and say from at least my news station, we are very down the middle. And so we're not harder on anybody. And that really says that it's very important to have, based on what you told me, it's very important to have a diverse newsroom because you need to have the people sitting around the table who can say, hey, wait a second, you said this last year. Well, you need to back it up with this person and say this too. It's very important. Or you posted this picture when this person was a suspect, but you're not posting this picture now. You have to have that diverse background in the newsroom. And because sometimes we all come from different backgrounds, we all have different experiences in life, and sometimes a person might not even realize that they might be offending a culture or a person because they've never lived it, they've never experienced it. And so it's important for other people who do identify with that culture to speak up in those newsrooms and those meetings. And that's why every corporation, business, church needs to have diversity so we can all have that inclusion.
And do you mean diversity just in like gender,
everything,
race, but like also
political
views? And is that something you guys try to do at your station? So
absolutely.
We want different political views, we want different races, we want different...
We don't talk, like I don't know my co-anchor, I don't know, like we don't say, hey, who would you vote for? It's just something we don't talk about, but it's definitely something that we strive to have in our newsroom. If you feel this way about this topic, that's awesome. Let's talk about it around this table and figure out how we can do the story without you. And also, if that person feels a certain way about something, we try not to put them on the story.
Okay, if they're like very opinionated on it.
Right, but absolutely it's important to hear their point of view for whatever reporters want to do that story and to hear the other point of view too.
So do you think traditional media has, like, and I know you say locally you guys don't get too politically biased. Do you think that traditional media in America, like the mainstream media, do you think it is too politically biased?
What do you mean by politically biased?
So I was watching, what's the dude on CNN, white hair? Anderson Cooper. Yeah, so I was watching him, and he was talking about he was talking about should have had this prepared earlier. He was talking about going through lies that Trump has said over and over. So that's fine. And once again, I've said, certain I just don't remember when Obama did that. But then you go on Fox, and they'll do the same thing. So they'll say, here are all the times that Obama lied, and they might not talk about the times that Trump has lied. And so it just seems like, it's pretty clear cut as far as like, we know that the day of the election, all the CNN news anchors looked like they were about to cry because Trump won the presidency, and they weren't quiet about that. I saw an interview with Van Jones where he was talking about being part of the Democratic push to begin, helping change the country. So it just seems like the news anchors have now become more and more politically biased, whether it's Fox, whether it's CNN, whether it's MSNBC. But this is something you don't see. You're looking at me like you're confused.
I don't recall seeing the CNN anchors looking like we're going to cry, so I couldn't speak on that. And also, because I didn't see the segment with Anderson Cooper when he was writing, crossing off what was said, that was lies, I couldn't really speak on it because I don't know what came before it or after it. So to be fair, I don't know a fair way to answer that question. But I don't think that it's anything. I think that politics right now are loud.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, totally.
But I don't think it's really. I know we're seeing it more often. It's more in our face.
Yeah.
But I don't know if it's any different from 10 years ago as far as how the reporting is going. I can't say because I can't. I'd have to look at how they covered Obama the 8 years he was in office and look at and to compare it to how they're reporting or on Trump right now. And I just think that a lot of people are just easily offended on every angle about everything, and anything you say is going to just cause chaos or offended or people's feelings to be hurt in some kind of way, and they're just looking at something to be angry about in some cases. So it's just really soft feelings all around right now.
I agree totally.
Let's talk about fake news real quick. That's another thing that's being talked about currently in our society. How would you define fake news? Or would you? Is that
I hate the term because what is fake news? It's a lie.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay.
I hated alternative facts. They were reporting it as alternative facts, and I was like, how is this okay? What is an alternative? Can you tell me what is an alternative fact?
It's a fact that's other than the fact.
No, you sound like them.
No. I'm trying to define it. I don't know.
Okay, right. So that's just about how I feel about that.
Okay.
Is there fake news? Not on my station.
Okay. Yeah.
We don't report fake news. We work really hard to tell good stories that matter. And I can't tell you what fake news is because we don't share it.
Hey, there you go. Fair enough.
And I hate the term.
and you hate the term. Yeah, of course. Do you think the current state of news does more harm or does more good currently? Currently.
What kind of question is this?
Hey, I'm just
the state of news. What is the state of news?
What is happening in the news right now?
What's happening in the news right now? How is it any different from 10 years ago? Tell me.
I don't know. To tell you the truth, I didn't really keep up with the news till last year in 2016 during the presidential election. That's really when I got sucked in. So a lot of people that I listen to, as I said, feel like fake news is happening, and they feel like
what do they
biased.
define as fake? What do you define as fake news?
So clearly, I would say clearly lying about a story. I would also define it as there are certain ideas that are presented in the news, like let's say like transgenderism, that certain people present as fact, like that that I gotta see how I'm gonna try not to get in trouble here as well. That the lifestyle of being transgender is something that should be normalized. So some people believe that's true, other people do not. And then so certain stories are presented in the news that like certain stations cover it as like, this is a normal part of life and you should deal with that. Other people say this isn't normal. This is an abnormal way to live. And so that would be considered fake news in the sense of like, I'm injecting my opinion.
Well, how do they do that? Are you saying that they don't have both sides in the story? It's just like,
Yeah.
it's either good or it's either bad.
Yeah, exactly. So one or the other, where it's like, you know, some people are saying this is how you should believe about transgenderism. This is how other people are saying it. So
where are you getting these stories from?
So like CNN will, most of the time you see, you know, pro homosexuality, pro transgenderism on CNN. You'll see on Fox they're going to be anti those things mostly. I think homosexuality though is now becoming like a back burner issue, even with Trump saying that like this isn't a topic that I care about, and so like it's pretty much removed itself from society as like a major talking point of whether like pro homosexuality, homosexual marriage or whatever. That seems to be removed, but yeah. So am I making sense or no?
I hear you.
Yeah.
I can't speak on that story, that topic that you saw, because of course I haven't seen it. But I can tell you that is the beauty of local news, because if you see something that you don't like, and everybody's not perfect. Sometimes we're trying to make deadlines and maybe it didn't come out as the reporter had intended. If you see something that offends you and you don't think that it was fair, you have the opportunity to call that newsroom and actually speak to that reporter on the phone or speak to the news director on the phone and explain why you thought the story was done unfairly, and even get the opportunity to have it redone or to go get another side for the next day, because you might bring to light something that the reporter didn't realize or that the news director didn't realize. Now, on the national level, you don't have that opportunity.
On the local level, you do.
Right. And so if you ever see that, which I hope you don't see that often, because I mean, I don't get to watch the other stations often, and not to give, you know, I think, of course, I have to be biased. I work at my station. I really like our product, but I think that all of them at least try to have, I think it's just basic journalism that local news stations just try to have both sides of the story, because we do have that easier access where we're going to hear from you.
People are going to call and yell at you like, I can't stand how you covered the story.
Right. So I mean, you can remember that as well. If you see something you don't like, you do have a voice, and you can call the station and explain it in a, you know, most times we have people who work at the desk, and we do get calls, and we are interested to hear what, because we're doing it for you. The whole reason that we're doing our stories, the reason that we are spending our lives informing you is for you. And we do want to hear from you, and we do want to know what you thought about it. And so tell us, if you tell us that sometimes people yell at us, well, I can't accept that. I can't accept you yelling at me, but if you talk to me and say why it didn't work out or why you felt a certain way about it, I will listen to you, or the other person who you might be offended by will, I'm sure, listen to you and try to fix it, or try to explain to you what happened, or why the story was told the way it was, and maybe you'll walk away with, oh, I get it now, or, you know, or I understand that. So it's just people, viewers, reporters, journalists, everybody. So if we just communicate better, we can understand each other better. We would not be pointing fingers at, you know, the news sucks, or people just don't get it. No, people just need to understand that we are all people. For the most part, local news is not trying to push an agenda. We're just trying to inform our community.
That's awesome. Okay. This is going to be my last question as far as the main interview, and then we'll see if OJ has any questions for you real quick. But the last question I have is that, do you think with the rise of new media platforms, that traditional news companies will struggle to continue to stay popular? So stuff like this, so like podcasts, YouTube. Do you think that news is going to struggle, or do you think their news is going to adapt and then move forward?
I think the landscape is definitely changing from 10 years ago when I got in the business. Facebook Lives and podcasts, as you mentioned, are definitely more popular sources. not more popular sources, but growing in popularity. I think that we're seeing already news stations and organizations and papers adapt. They have their own podcasts. They have, they're doing Facebook Lives more often, or because certain demographics might not be watching the news, well, they might get it from Facebook. So we're a lot more active on social media. So we definitely are seeing a transition from every day open the paper, read it, or watch the news at 5 o'clock to finding ways to, and a reporter's actual job duties have changed so much from 10 years ago, as far as like, basically we used to have a 5 and a 6 o'clock news. I mean, for a reporter who came in at 9 o'clock and who left at 7 p.m., they would be responsible for maybe being in the 5 o'clock show and the 6 o'clock show. Now they're responsible for posting on Facebook about their story, tweeting about their story, writing their story, then tracking their story, then writing it for the web. The web is a big thing now too, because people sometimes don't watch the 6 o'clock news because they had to go pick up their kids from dance. So they might read the story on the website. So the job has changed a lot as the world transitions to their cell phones and their computers. So I think that, to answer your question, it's just like, it's like nature. Those who adapt survive, and I think that's what we'll see in the news world, because people are always going to need news. They're always going to consume. We just have to adapt to what is most convenient for people, and I'm seeing that happen.
Absolutely. OJ, do you have any questions you'd like to ask Candace while we're here? Candace has been killing it.
Yeah.
He's like, I'm nervous. He's like, what if she comes back on me?
I was a little attacked, but that's okay.
You were? You felt attacked? Really?
No.
Oh, that was not the intention.
Why are you always pushing an agenda?
I never said your stage. I was saying as a whole. I like. Hey, for the record, I like CBS 6. I watched it. Yeah, I've checked it out. I think it's great. I think you do a great job.
Thank you.
I really do enjoy it. If it ever seemed like I was coming at her, so I wanted to say that on the podcast.
We appreciate you watching.
Yes, you're welcome. Just don't make her angry. She turns green.
To just expand on Zach's last question about like social media sort of like shifting the landscape. How do you feel about social media, just like social media newscasters, like reporting stories first and then like the news station having to catch up?
What do you mean, social media reporters? Like people who don't actually work at a news station?
Yeah, but so basically like the new generation of like how we have like Facebook Live and IGV, or how they're just like they're the first ones on the scene, and they're
not every time.
Well, yeah, I mean,
let's make that clear.
Well, for one example, I'll give I forget her name, but Zack and I were talking about this before the interview. It was this 16-year-old in Chicago who was she was found in a deep freeze at a hotel from this high school party, and it was pretty much like social media was like all on it, and they were more so pressuring like the local news to pick it up too.
So you want to know how I feel about that happening? Like feeling that pressure?
Yeah.
I appreciate it. I feel like it holds local news accountable because it's so easy for people to be like, oh, the news isn't doing enough. The news isn't doing enough. But it's easy for everybody to do that if you haven't walked in the person you're pointing at's shoes. Every single day we are bombarded with so many stories, so many people needing help, so many tips, right? And I'm not saying that one story is more important than another, but if you are telling me that this is what we want to see, this is what we need you to fix, we are going to listen to you. That's just what it is. And so social media being able to give people that voice, I think is amazing, because we are watching and we do see that, and it is a reminder to be like, okay, get back, make the call to the police officer again and the investigator again, and see what's going on, what's new with this case, what's new, what did they find, or why people are saying that they saw this in the video, or you didn't mention this, what is that? Absolutely, as many hands are on it. I that's awesome. But also understand that it's not like they don't care. It's not like the news media doesn't care. So many people go missing every single day. So many things are happening that we have to choose. What are we going to talk about today? What are we going to do today? It's not that one story is more important than the other. It's just like, what is the news of today? Is there anything new on this case? We haven't seen anything new, so we're going to move over here and do this story. And then once we find out something's new, we're going to go back to this story. But if you were pushing it in my face, I'm not going to forget it. That's absolutely for sure. So absolutely, if that's a tool that we can use to solve cases, to help, police work a little harder. And they're just like I'm saying that reporters are doing a lot. Police have investigations and things that they're working on that I don't know about. So it's like, I don't want to judge anybody without walking in their shoes. But if somebody can keep me accountable and keep them, and so I can keep them accountable, so we can solve this story, let's all do it together. How about that? I think that's a good tool to have.
That's great. That's great. And this is why I wanted to do this podcast, was to give people perspective of, okay, so I'm trying to ask the tough questions that people want to know about reporters, and I think you've given a great example of what you guys do and what's going on behind the scenes. All right, so let's start the bonus interview section. So
Okay.
This is gonna be the fun part. So, how do you feel about the interview so far? We doing all right?
I feel like, I don't know. It's just like, I'm not comfortable being asked questions because I'm usually the person asking.
Yeah.
That's why I tried to turn the interview on you a few times.
Yeah, you did that. And I was like, wait a second, what are we doing here? I was like, I wasn't prepared for this. I was like, I look like an idiot right now. I'm like, well, you know that time that happened at the thing at the place, and you're like, yeah, what thing, what place? What are you talking about? I'm like, I don't know, Candace. Can't we just be friends? All right. So bonus interview. So here's a question I think everyone really wants to know, and that's, how many dresses do you have to own in order to be a newscaster? Because I feel like you guys always have something new on. I'm like, it's got to be expensive to be in that industry.
It's crazy. Like, and it's different because if you were doing it, if you were my co-anchor, it's been proven.
Yeah,
it was scientific.
4 suits.
No, one
shirts.
suit.
One suit.
One man for an entire year wore the same exact suit, and he changed his tie 365 days. Well, not really, because the weekend's off. He wore the same suit, same shirt, and changed his tie. Yeah. Nobody noticed. Nobody noticed. His co-anchor, she tried to wear the same dress, that she wore that dress once every week for 4 weeks. And people were calling, does she need to change her?
I have dresses I can donate. You guys are not paying her enough.
What? That's not even fair. My co-anchor gives me a hard time about, all he has to do is buy ties, and you can buy that anywhere. So yes, and so much so that I have begun to sew. So I can make dresses.
You know, when I was researching for this interview, I saw on your Facebook that you're like, I like working out. I think it was like food maybe, and then it was like, and I like sewing, and I was gonna ask you about that. I was like, so you were like, I can't pay for all these dresses anymore.
No, it's just a bonus that I can actually make a dress, but I totally find it relaxing because like life is so like always go. When you sit in front of a sewing machine and people laugh at me, and my co-anchor calls me a granny, and he told me if I go on a date, make sure I keep that until we're married.
Just put it in the closet. Don't let him see it. Don't let him see it.
Don't tell him you sew until he proposes.
It's too late. It's out now. We're telling everyone.
No, it's just really relaxing because it just makes you like focus in on. So you like, that's the only thing you're focusing on. Yeah. You're not thinking about anything else.
You're like so interesting because it's like, you're like, oh yeah, I'm a newscaster, but I've like played basketball when I was in college. So I was playing ball on the court, and then I'd go do the news while I was in high school, report on the game, and then get back into the game.
It was kind of like that. Yeah, just like that.
It's just like that. Like, she's amazing. She's running around this court in this dress. Everybody else is all dressed up for the game. She got the dress on. She made the uniforms. That's hilarious. What is the most embarrassing thing that's happened to you on the air?
Oh,
that you're willing to talk about? or that you're not willing to talk about? Because that would probably be the more interesting story.
Thank God I'm covered because, like, as far as when I say that, for those who believe in God, I mean, like, with his favor. Because I haven't had anything that has, thank you, Lord, and I thank you that nothing is going to happen, even though I said this.
Yeah.
The
Then
only
Monday
thing,
something happens. You're like, Zach jinxed me.
I'm good. I'm protected. I'm not worried about it. But the only thing I can remember is like when I first started, I was in like market, like it was a very small market, and I was talking to the sports. Wait, no, I remember. Okay, you just jogged my memory. And okay, so the most embarrassing thing that ever happened to me, for sure, because I cried afterwards.
Oh no.
I was working in my second station, and I did a whole story, and I called the person that I interviewed, who was a prominent person in the community, another person's name, the entire story. And at the end of it, the anchor had to correct it and was like, that was actually. And I was so embarrassed. I cried in the hallway. I cuddled up under the coat rack.
Oh no.
And then a very, very nice sports anchor came, the main sports anchor came, and he goes, honey, I one time did a story on an athlete, a boxer, and told the world that he was dead, and he had died 10 years before.
And he was alive?
He said, I'm still alive. No. The boxer had died a
he was
decade
reporting
before.
on it.
And he was he was reporting on it 10 years after he had already died. And like, how do you make that
Well, like the
mistake?
fight was like, yeah, this fight happened last night. It was amazing. And it was actually 10 years before.
No, he was just like, he did an obit, a full story, an obituary piece on a famous boxer.
Yeah.
And everybody was like, bro, he died 10 years ago. What is this? And he was like, what? And so that happened. So he goes, I lived. That was like 5 years ago.
Yeah.
I lived.
Yeah.
You're going to live.
Yeah.
Tomorrow's, maybe tomorrow you'll still be a little sore about it. But like 10 years from now, it won't. You'll laugh about it. And look,
you're laughing
it's 10 years from now, then
yeah.
I think. And I'm laughing, well, not quite 10, but a little bit close to 10. And
Okay.
I'm laughing about it now.
That's great. Perfect.
Hey guys,
Perfect.
it's not the end of the world. Anything you're going through, it's not the end of the world.
That's good. We're gonna use that as our hook for the episode.
It's not the end of the world.
If you could commit one crime without being caught, what crime would you commit?
I couldn't.
You could. Come on.
Let me tell you.
One.
No. In fact, people laugh at me. Back at my parents own a restaurant, and one of the people, we're really good friends because all the people who work there have been there since my parents opened the restaurant, and they like even went to church with us. Like we all went to the same church and everything.
Yeah.
And I remember it was like we had a conversation, and we were at the restaurant, and I didn't give the person their correct change back, and it might have been like $5, and I ran out of the restaurant to give him the change, like chased down the car, and the cook was like, "But why?" And I was like, I'm not going to hell over $5. And so
God forgives up to 4. Anything over, you just screwed for eternity.
So I don't know. I have a really big conscience.
Well, you've ruined my next question. So you were walking by a store and saw this really nice sewing machine, and you just had to have it. You've stolen it. I'm making this story up because you were no fun for the last question.
It's irrelevant.
So, no, here it is. This is what happened. So you walk by the store. You're like, I gotta have it. So you stole the sewing machine. Okay. Now you're on trial. Who would be the person? I had to come up with something because you didn't help me out with the last question. All right. So now you're on trial for stealing the sewing machine. Who would be the person that you would act as your legal representation who is not a lawyer? Who is that person? Does that question make sense? Do I need to say it again?
No. So out of the people
you know, you're like best friend, family member. You're like, I have one person who would come and be a good lawyer for me that's not a lawyer.
About me stealing a sewing
machine, yes.
I would have so many character witnesses if I had to choose one.
Yeah.
I just would choose my dad. Just because he's a detective anyway, so I feel like
perfect.
he would be able to explain to them why I didn't steal it. Okay, let's make it clear.
No, you stole it.
No, I was set up. There's no way.
It's weird that this sewing machine was in a store and the window was broken. Suddenly that same sewing machine
because I happened to walk by the black woman walking by.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. Okay, she's playing the race card. Okay.
Okay, let's get that out, please. Wait, we were doing so good up until.
Then we had to bring race into it. All right.
Oh man.
Last bonus interview question. Here we go. If you could have, I guess this is another one that you were. I'm going to ask it, but I have a feeling I know what your answer is now that we've gone through a few of these. If you could have one entire country depopulated as your private property, which country would you take as your own? If you say I wouldn't depopulate a country, you're going to ruin this interview.
You guys, I promise you, I couldn't do it.
Look,
How can
okay,
I
look.
get out, move? This is
Here's
mine.
Here's the thing. All right, so we're gonna depopulate this country, but we're gonna put them in a really nice country, and they're gonna be all expenses paid. All expenses paid. So you depopulate a country. What is it?
Does it have to be a country? Can it
Yes.
just be a place?
A place. Okay, fine. I'll go halfway with you, but you have to depopulate it.
That's not fair because I haven't traveled the world enough to make a great decision based on places that I've been.
Sure.
Okay, it would no doubt be Jamaica.
Jamaica.
I
is it?
love Jamaica,
Yeah.
but I want the people to stay
Okay.
because they make Jamaica.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Well.
And Jamaica's a country, so
It is. It is. It wasn't just so we're covered. You were going to be getting messages on Facebook like, Candace, you heard the interview. Jamaica is a
let's
country.
make it clear. I know. I was just thinking about other places that I might have said.
I went along with it, though. I was like, yeah, Jamaica's a great city. So, perfect. Well, hey, Candace, I want to thank you for coming on. You've been a good sport. I've been trying to ask, questions that I think people want to know about their newscasters. I think you did a great job. So thanks for coming on, and thanks everybody for listening to this week's episode of Reaching Out with Zack Carter.
Thanks for having me. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.
Hey everybody, I wanted to thank you for listening to this week's episode of Reaching Out with Zack Carter. I had a blast interviewing Candace. I learned a lot. We received great responses, great feedback from you all about what we're doing here. Like I had announced last week, we're aiming to get 150 likes on Facebook by Thanksgiving. Super doable. When I made that announcement last week, we were at about 90 likes. Now we've hit 100, which is great, which is awesome. We got some growth, but we still need your help to grow. So if you haven't already, please like us on Facebook. Please subscribe to the podcast on iTunes and leave a review. And lastly, tell your friends about us so we can tell everybody how this is the greatest podcast of all time. Okie dokie. We'll see y'all again next week on Reaching Out with Zack Carter.